Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with my first in another series of videos about example projects. The example projects are provided by Oracle so that we can educate ourselves as to how different parts of the Intelligent Advisor functionality works. And if 2023 was the year when we looked through all of the example projects provided with Oracle Policy Modeling, 2024 is going to be the year that we will look through all of the decision service example projects. A reminder that decision services are the first part of the web-based authoring platform that came into being, and it allows us to write rules in an entirely web-based format and execute them as REST-based web services. So the first one we're going to look at is called Account Risk Assessment. Just a reminder that all of these example files can be found in the online documentation. If you go to Use Intelligent Advisor, Intelligent Advisor Decision Services, work with decision service projects, you'll find a subject called Example Decision Service Projects. So we're going to start right at the top with Account Risk Assessment, and the use case is about risk analysis or assessment, and it's therefore focusing on financial services. However, there are plenty of other industries that do risk assessment, let's be honest. The idea is to work out whether a bank account, transaction account that's going to be opened can be automatically approved by our assessment engine or whether it needs to be assessed by a human. So downloading the file is as simple as clicking on that link. Remember that decision services have simple JSON files. They're not like Oracle Policy Modeling that have zip files which contain a large number of other files. Everything is in one JSON file. Assuming you've downloaded the JSON file, you'll need access to an Intelligent Advisor hub. And from that hub, in the projects page, if you're looking at a modern hub, you'll notice now that there are several different kinds of projects. The traditional policy modeling projects, the decision service project, which is where we're going to be, and then the flows and flow schemes, which relate to the second part of the web-based authoring platform, the ability to create visual interfaces, which we would have called interviews in OPM. Now they are known as flows and flow schemes. We'll be looking at those, of course, in 2024 as well. But for now, we're going to stick with decision services. We're going to go to the Actions menu, and we're going to click Import, and we're going to go and get the JSON file that I just downloaded. I'll go ahead and select the file and click Open. And before it's imported completely, we will see a preview of what's going to be in our Oracle Intelligent Advisor Hub in just a moment. So we can see in the preview window that we can change the project name and change the workspace. So I'm just going to put my little prefix on here so I know that it's me. And we can see the definition of the input and output, the contract, if you will. So this service has three inputs: an account type, which is required, transaction limit, which is required, a person address object, which has an address country, both of which are required as well. The output is a single Boolean, whether the account requires manual oversight or not. As you can see, we could preview the entire contents of the project before we actually import it. I'm going to go ahead and import the service right now. So let's review the service. As you'll know, if you've been a reader of our new book, Consultant's Guide to Decision Services, all decision services, when you write rules, the scope is defined by the blocks that they're in. So we can see that this block is calculated once per case. So this would be the equivalent of a global rule or set of rules. The account must be reviewed prior to approval. You'll recall that that is actually the output attribute. If the person lives in a high-risk country, or if the requested account is high risk. And how do we decide if they live in a high-risk country? Well, we check their addresses, and if there's at least one address that's in the high-risk country, then they live in a high-risk country. Those of you who are familiar with OPM will notice that we have an exists function in decision services, just like we have an exists function in Oracle Policy Modeling. Only here is going through the rows of the person's address. If you're familiar with Excel spreadsheets, then the color schemes of these tables should look familiar. The green column is a condition, the salmon-colored column is a conclusion. So these are the account types, followed by the ease of access, and then another table underneath qualifying ease of access with a transaction limit, condition, and whether or not the account is high risk. Presumably it's high risk if we have a high access, easy access, and high transaction. Finally, we have a list of countries and whether they are high, medium, or low. A reminder that the decision service can also have comments, notes in effect, just like you can have comments in a Oracle Policy Modeling file. So this is actually a piece of text that has been disabled, commented out, and that's why it has enable here, but you can still use that technique to add comments to your decision service. You should also recall that within the decision service, but outside of the blocks, you can also have headings just like you have in Word, and that allows you to enter some comment-based text, since these are ignored for the purposes of rule execution. Let's put it into heading, or maybe heading 4. So now that we've reviewed this very simple decision service, we're going first of all to commit, save, change, and we'll be asked for comment. So added header. Okay. If we want to see how it works, we have two choices. We can either go immediately into live mode, or we can go into run via REST. Of course, there is a third option. We can simply deploy it and then use it using Postman or SoapUI, but really that's outside of the scope of what we're doing in this video. Let's use live mode, since it's the easiest, and that allows us to switch on a kind of live debugger. You'll notice now that the attributes all have tooltips telling me their current values. So if I go to the contract and I stipulate the minimum required, which would be the account type, and we'll put transaction, since that's one of the account types, you'll notice the indicator here tells me that I have just selected an account type of transaction, which means the ease of access is high, and we'll request a transaction limit of 12,000. And if we scroll down, we'll see that that's considered as, well, it's so small, it's off the charts, in the sense that it is not a high-risk transaction. I will also go ahead and add at least one address. We'll say that this is Estonia. And if we scroll down, we'll see that we are not one of the high-risk countries. We are considered a low-risk country, which means that over here on the left-hand side, the manual approval value is set to false. We can see it here too, that neither of these conditions are true. Therefore, approval is not required because I don't live in a high-risk country, and so on for the reasons I showed you. If we want to go to the run with REST, we can do it in a very similar way, just a slightly different user interface without the kind of debugging aspect to it. We can scroll down and go to the Try It section. Users of Swagger and other tools, Swagger UI and other tools will be very familiar with this kind of thing. I can enter the transaction limit. I can enter the type. I can enter an address. Let's say I'm in Kenya. And I do not require manual approval. If I enter a very large transaction limit, I do require manual approval. If I wanted to test this using Postman, I could go ahead and test it right away using this development version, or I could deploy it and test it using the deployed version. Those of you who want to do that will also need to acquire a token so that you authenticate yourselves. And if you're into it and you want to keep a record of this, you can download the Swagger specification right here and load it into your favorite tool. So account risk assessment. For me, the three big things about this are A, it's a good example of a simple decision service. B, it uses tables, which I'm a big fan in decision services. They're very easy to read, very easy to build, and they use two tables, one on top of the other, in the sense that the ease of access is a conclusion of table 1 and is also the input of table 2, which is very familiar for those of us who do risk analysis, risk matrices. There are always a succession of inputs and outputs. And finally, I like this because they've used comments, they've used a header. Let's come out of live mode again, go back to editing mode. You'll notice that because I use these, I have this here which allows me to navigate. So if I have a very long file, let's say that I have come down here, I split the rule block, I type in the message here, let's do a test, heading 1. You'll see that I can now use these to navigate through the document, which is pretty cool. All of this and more has been discussed in the Consultant's Guide to Decision Services, which is for sale right now in Amazon. And if not, I hope you don't want to buy that. That's fine. Just watch the videos, enjoy learning about decision services, because all the time you spend learning about decision services now will be of great value to you when you find yourself on your next project that uses only web authoring. So this is time well spent. Thanks for watching. See you next time.